All right, everybody. So today I wanted to review this book right here. Let's get right into it. We're talking about Gateway to Freedom, subtitled The Hidden History of the Underground Railroad. It's written by Eric Foner, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, and I just noticed this now, even though I read this at the beginning of January. Look at that bibliography. I mean, that man has said a lot of words. Anyway, what a great book! I think I put this at about 4 stars. I would highly recommend it for Black History Month coming up here in February. It's not a very big book. It's got some illustrations in it. I think even with the liner notes here, the end notes, you got, I don't know, about just under 280 pages, really. So that you can go through that pretty quick. It was actually written back in 2015, so it's been around for a little while, the better part of a decade. And I was really impressed with it. I don't know if there's any real new revelations in this book, but certainly lots of interesting stuff. A lot of items that you may not have heard of before. Doesn't come up regularly in conversation when we're speaking about this particular period in time. It's got, I would say, as far as features go in the book, it's got some great maps. What I really appreciated was you could see where the main strongholds were in the abolitionist movement, and the connections of the Underground Railroad, throughout the South, which of course there wasn't too terribly many places that slaves could go to get away. There were a few hubs, and then from there, they would be cycled along to so many other places, and it sort of shows you various routes that people could have taken. Obviously, I think the sort of the main abolitionist center of gravity was around New York. Center of gravity in the sense that this is where a lot of people sort of got sorted out, whether they were going to go to Canada or whether they were going to stay in the States. But also, this is also where a lot of the slave catchers were, the kidnappers that wanted to reclaim their property. In fact, on that note, there was something that I hadn't given a whole lot of thought before, which was, and feeding into how difficult it's been for this history to get told properly, and why so much of this African American history is oral, is because back then, to accuse a white man of whatever wrongs were done generally in the South, on some plantation somewhere, I mean, your word was worth nothing, because you were property. You didn't have status as a human being. But beyond that, if you published your scars, from being whipped or broken in by many of the slave breaking houses that existed at the time, and that showed up in some sort of periodical or publication, you've just announced to the world where you are. So, I mean, it's a perfectly vicious circle. It's things like that, which is exactly how the story doesn't get told, and it doesn't get told properly, and it doesn't get recorded. And that's how the victor wins over time. And so, it's so many elements like that you really begin to get a sense of the hopelessness of being born within this system, and the irrevocable nature of slavery as an institution. And I mean, how did that play out really through Reconstruction? Emancipation was not the long waited for respite that so many people were desiring. It was, in many ways, it was a recrudescence of the same old status quo. So yeah, those features and charts and anecdotes like that really reinforce the argument. I'm not sure that he's really driving at a main argument, but this is sort of what I was intuiting into the book, at least where I kept coming back to. I think the man was just trying to, right on the period. But the argument that I keep coming back to, at least what this really drove home for me, was solutions, especially to historical wrongdoings, injustices, such as the institution of slavery, they can't be fixed through individual means. He does document a great deal of what abolitionists did, and they did some wonderful things that shouldn't be sold short. But when you contrast the numbers of those who were freed, I'm using the word freed because the freedom that they got was not really that great anyway, but freed, contrasting that with the the reality of how many people were enslaved, or how many people were just affected by slavery overall, even if they weren't directly impacted. The numbers are abysmal. Yes, the abolitionists deserve a great amount of praise and credit for what they did, but the solutions to these sort of historical wrongs must be of a political nature. To just expect that, we've got this terrible injustice and that people are going to change the culture at some sort of bottom-up level, for which there can be some, look at the modern-day Palestine situation. There is a lot of bottom-up going on. There's a lot of ground-level pressure that's being built, and that's not nothing. I would never sell that short or dismiss it. But at the same time, there has to be a top-heavy solution that comes forward, which is necessarily imperfect, necessarily another form of injustice. But what do you have? You can only choose between solutions that are imperfect, and some are better than others. It's better to have no slavery, to have problems under a no slavery framework, but at least you don't have slavery anymore. Isn't that better? There's worse, and then there's better. And I say, if we can find imperfect solutions, and I'm tying this in, by the way, I'm thinking in the back of my head with, so many exigencies that exist right this very moment. What do we do about them? Do we throw up our hands and do nothing just because we have no perfect solutions at hand? If we really believe in this thing called human cooperation, and we believe in the whole project of civilization, we have to think in those sort of terms. Think in the terms of making sausage, not this beautiful foie gras, that doesn't really amount to much. And if you're in the business of sausage making, you can end up with something really great, steady improvements. Look at how far we've come. I'm in Canada, but look how far you've come in the United States from slavery. Race relations have not improved to the extent that we want. Perhaps we will never see a real, truly post-racial society, but the ultimate solutions to eradicate wrongs that affect so many people, they have to come through political means. I don't know if he said that explicitly, but that's just sort of what I kept coming back to. I'm going to read a little segment here. Building on fresh evidence, including a detailed record of slave escapes secretly kept by Sidney Howard Gray, one of the key organizers in New York, Foner elevates the Underground Railroad from folklore to sweeping history. The story is inspiring, full of memorable characters making their first appearance on the historical stage, and significant. The controversy over fugitive slaves inflamed the sectional crisis of the 1850s. It eventually took a civil war to destroy American slavery, but here at last is the story of the courageous effort to fight slavery by practical abolition, person by person, family by family. And so if you apply that to today's situation of what injustices are going on, there's so many of them, but let's take, one of the prime ones with climate change and climate action. Yes, I want to get away from incrementalism, but at the same time, we need to do a whole lot of sausage making. We need to build on steady gains. And that's the only way of bringing about real change in that particular regard among so many others. Oh, I wanted to mention on the topic of related works. There have been so many that I've read lately. I would really highly recommend The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Of course, the great abolitionist. He figures quite prominently in here, along with Garrison and Smith, and Beecher Stowe and Tubman, and all these great figures that we know of connected to the Underground Railroad and abolition. But The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass is really, really just a crippling read. It'll just bring you to your knees. Also, Barracoon. Can't remember who that was written by. I have it just over there. It was one of the New York Times bestsellers for Black literature overall. That again is just devastating. You'll read that and just kind of just stare at the wall for 10 minutes through parts of it. So anyway, I don't have much negative to say about it. In fact, even though it didn't get 5 stars, it's really over trivial details. It was certainly worth the read. Maybe tell me in the comments, did you read this book before? Gateway to Freedom? Do you intend to read it? I don't think that it got nearly as much credit as it should have, or much publicity. What are your thoughts on it, or questions that before you maybe find it at the library or buy it, that you would like to know about it? Maybe tell me in the comments, and we can chat down there a little more about it. Thanks for stopping by. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.